base. He was a commander on it for 2 years. He knows it very well. Colonel, good to see you.
Good to be with you, Megyn.
You know, Chuck Hagel talking about, we're going to do what we need to do. In September of 2013, a former Navy man opened fire at the Washington Navy Yard and killed at least 13 people, including the gunman. After that, Mr. Hagel ordered the Pentagon to review security at all U.S. defense installations worldwide, to examine the granting of security clearances and so on. Similar measures were taken after the first Fort Hood, and yet still it continues to happen. However, so that leads you to say they need to do more. However, it's like a little city. I mean, how can they better protect their little city any more than we can protect New York City or Dallas, Texas, or any other city where violence, crime happens?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. First of all, condolences go out to the families of those who have been killed and wounded. What people fail to understand is that soldiers or anyone on a military installation, not everyone is armed. As a matter of fact, your weapon, your personally assigned weapon, is in an arms room. And even if you're going to draw that weapon out to go to a rifle range or to a pistol range for marksmanship training, you don't have the ammunition with you. The ammunition meets you out there. So when you talk about a military installation outside of the civilian contracted police or the military police, no one is armed. And so it becomes a free fire area.
It's a good point, and we've been talking about it a little bit this hour because a lot of our viewers have been asking, why wouldn't one of these, few dozen people who are likely in this facility have shot this shooter, earlier? How did he get to shoot so many people? Same question with the 2009 incident.
Absolutely. And
there's a reason for that. They weren't armed.
They're not armed. And if you go back and you look at what happened in 2009, you look at what happened at the Navy Yard, those were not military personnel that shot those two assailants. In Fort Hood, the first time, it was civilian contracted police officers. And there at the Navy Yard, it was actually D.C. police officers that came and shot. So you did not even have military that could react and take these assailants down. So we do have a problem. We do have an issue. And when you look at this, first of all, I can tell you as a commander, the question is now the background of this soldier. They're going through his barracks room, or if he was off post, they're going through his off post residence. They're looking at his computer files.
So not everybody lives on the base.
No, not everyone lives on the base. Absolutely. Okay. And they're trying to ascertain how was it that this individual was able to have a firearm. And now,
if you live off the base, when you come on the base, do you have to go through a magnetometer or anything to search you for weapons?
No, but the thing is, you have a sticker, and normally enlisted have a color code sticker. Officers have a color code sticker, and pretty much so you're just waved right on. Maybe selectively.
So it's an honor system, though.
It's basically
that you're not going to bring a weapon on.
Absolutely, and so no one is really going through the hoods and the trunks and things like that, unless the level of security goes to a higher status.
What do you make of the fact that reportedly, and this is still fluid, but that he got off 20 rounds? Does that tell you anything about the kind of weapon he likely had? I just can't imagine that he could get off too many rounds with all these military sitting there, without somebody trying to tackle him. But yet it happened that way before.
Well, you got to understand something. If someone is armed, you are unarmed, and they're firing, rounds at you, your immediate, instinct is to take cover.
Yeah, right.
Because you cannot return fire. And
especially these poor guys in the medical unit, as our last guest was just describing.
Yeah, and that's the 1st Medical Brigade. At Fort Hood, Texas, you have what is called 2 division-sized units. You have the 1st Cavalry Division and the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment. The 1st Medical Brigade is assigned to the Corps headquarters, the 3 Corps headquarters.
So what does that mean? It's basically where they go if they need medical care for this?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Those are mostly medically trained soldiers. That's their military occupation specialty. So they're not infantrymen, they're not tankers, they're not artillerymen, they're not combat arms men and women in that type of a unit. So, once again, you're talking about people that aren't trained to, immediately react and take the right type of, actions to combat someone that's firing upon them. But when you're not armed, you're shooting ducks. You are certainly shooting ducks. And so I think we have to start looking at what can we do to make sure we don't have our military bases to be free fire zones. A lot of people are talking about allowing them to have their concealed weapons license, but you can also have a duty roster where you say certain members in the leadership of a unit are able to, carry, and we know who those individuals are, and you rotate that duty and responsibility.
Let me stand you by because I want to bring in Pete Hegseth. He's an Iraq and Afghanistan war vet, and he's CEO of Concerned Veterans for America. Pete, your thoughts on that? We're not trying to put blame on anybody other than the shooter here, but we want to look at how we can better protect our men and women on these bases.
I think the colonel's onto something. You talk about staff NCOs or officers assigned. The Commandant of the Marine Corps brought this idea up late in 2013 after the Navy Yard shooting, the idea that you have assigned individuals within a unit who have a firearm. You may not want to go down the road of anyone who has a concealed permit carrying a weapon on post for reasons the colonel and I have experienced on active duty. You want to maintain discipline and order within your unit and who's carrying and who's not. And most of the time you're assigning weapons to go out to the range or for a military operation. But it does make sense. You're under a veil of a protection on a base where it's an honor system. There are guards at the front gate protecting who can come in and who cannot. But otherwise, it's the military police or other guards who are charged with providing that safety. And otherwise, you are, as the colonel said, in many ways sitting ducks if someone decides to go rogue.
And there's something. I mean, I understand how people worry about arming everybody on board on these bases, and a lot of these guys are suffering from PTSD and so on, and there are potential issues there, and yet the notion of really not trusting the vast majority of our men and women in uniform to whom we give guns to not use them on one another also raises questions for a lot of folks, Pete.
I think it does. We trust young 18, 19-year-old soldiers, Marines, and others to go into combat and defend us on our behalf. And we give them a great deal of responsibility. And I think we recognize with that responsibility, there's a lot that comes with that responsibility here on post in the United States. Sometimes, and we've seen this, the colonel's seen it too, commands can be very safety conscious. We want to dial back any risk whatsoever. And even on post and even sometimes on deployment, ammunition is withheld more than it should be. I think we need to be entrusting junior leaders and others to make the tough decisions on site. I'm not saying you arm everybody. That's not what we're talking about here. Yeah. But sometimes risk mitigation can go too far, which means you've got a bunch of unarmed people in particular situations that can't fend for themselves.
Colonel, last thought. What is likely going on right now as we await this news conference at Fort Hood?
Well, I can tell you at the command level, every single person in the chain of command for that soldier is being asked, what were the indicators and warnings that you saw. They're looking at, like I said, his barracks room or his off-post residence. They're trying to piece together, the motive, because that's the most important thing to understand.
Very good of you to be here. Pete, you as well. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We'll be right back.
Thanks.